Yes, well, you may well wonder why we're pointing our camera tonight at Belfast City Hall. So are we a little bit, but it was billed as the place where there could be a large demonstration again tonight, and that could, of course, turn violent. Absolutely nobody has turned up, so here we are. Now, that might tell you something about the way this situation is going to unfold, but nobody was taking any chances. Buses and trains taken off the streets here around 5 o'clock. Business schools also closing early. After the events of the last 24 hours, clearly the authorities didn't want to take any chances. And obviously those events have opened up some pretty big and wide questions, not just here in Northern Ireland, but well beyond. The correlation between public housing policy and immigration and tensions that could arise around that, something people on the streets talked a lot about last night. The free flow of people north and south across the border with the Irish Republic, that of course a long-standing historic arrangement, and indeed questions about the possible connections between loyalism and racism. Well, we begin our report with events as they unfolded on the streets across this city and beyond last night. Police and politicians had called for calm last night. Cue smoke over Belfast from mid-evening. This city has seen worse, far worse. But last night was organised, it was targeted, and it was racist. An immigrant family burned out of their home in loyalist East Belfast by a mob of masked men, escorted to the safety of a police Land Rover with what they could carry. Images which are resonating, given this city's history. This morning, the ritual of clearing up, boarding up, but the cleansing of anger and fear is now the real challenge.
I'm afraid maybe I might be the next to be attacked on the street. So I don't know where to take my family, my children, who is 9 years old, who is asking me every question that crosses his mind.
One of several lives changed in this street alone.
There's literally nothing I could have done about it. I told them and all when they were lighting the car on fire, that's my property where our car is. And they still didn't care. They were like, oh, it'll be safe, it'll be safe. I knew straight away it wasn't going to be safe.
Further protests are planned this evening. The police clearly appalled at potentially criminal online incitement.
If it's your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, people in your sports clubs, neighbours that you think were out last night, stop them from coming out today. This has got to stop. We cannot have a society that allows this to happen. We have to make a stand.
Incitement that preceded all this. Last night police were dealing with sporadic violence across the city and elsewhere. Newton Abbey, Portadown. West Belfast around 10 p.m. Another burning barricade in another loyalist area of the city. On the Shankill Road, one of the main roads in West Belfast, blocked with fire as you can see, but that's not a priority. There's no police anywhere near here so far as we can see, and that's because in areas like the one behind me there are people getting burned out of their houses. Slightly more important. And yet at the same time the Republican Falls Road nearby, totally quiet. Questions growing here today about culture, tradition and racism. After Monday's attack in North Belfast, Hadi Al-Udeid from Sudan appeared by video link before Belfast magistrates this morning, charged with attempted murder and several other offences. He entered no plea and was remanded in custody. Stephen Ogilvie has lost an eye and remains serious but stable in hospital. His family has issued this statement.
We are completely devastated by the horrific attack on our loved one. This has been a massive shock to our whole family, and right now our only priority is being at his bedside and helping him recover. We do not want this terrible tragedy to be used to divide people or fuel hostility.
Water cannon used in perhaps the most significant standoff with rioters, some armed with lasers to dazzle police. This was Clough-Fern, a few miles north of Belfast. Well, this confrontation now has been going on for several hours between the police lines and a relatively small gang of youth behind. Every now and then the police respond to incoming attacks from rocks and stones and all manner of debris with their water cannon. The ground strewn with medical waste, used syringes after a large sharps bin was thrown at the police. Across the city people looked on, one citing the irony of the Irish, north and south, protesting against migration.
They forget that the people of Ireland are the largest immigrants in the world.
Exactly.
There's Irish people in all four corners of the world.
But he and so many others point to housing as a key reason for the anger, namely HMOs, houses of multi-occupancy. Pastor Stephen Walker in East Belfast echoes many.
On one instance, I walked from here to a shop at the bottom of the road here. I spoke to 11 people, and only 2 of those 11 spoke to me with a Belfast accent. There were people from all over Europe, Africa.
Isn't that
they're
wonderful?
coming here. Yeah, oh, yes, if they're coming for the right reason, but why? Why would you leave? I wouldn't leave my family if in a war-torn state.
So here we are, 24 hours on, some of the debris still to be cleared away, and another round of appeals for calm.
Well, you can probably hear an alarm in the background. Don't worry about that. It's just, well, it's an alarm. Joined now, though, by Sarah Warsami. Sarah, you've been out with people very, very directly affected, brutally, by what's been going on here. What have you found?
Alex, there's unease among the diverse ethnic minority community here in Belfast. I have spoken to so many that call this city home, some for a couple of years, others for 60 years. They have all condemned the horrific stabbing, but they're also shocked at the backlash, at how quickly rioters targeted homes with immigrants, at how quickly they started to look at cars and find out what kind of passengers are in there. So they are afraid of being singled out. And there is genuine fear. Many have told me they're staying inside this evening because of the scenes we saw last night.
Oh, staying inside the home?
Staying inside, they're not leaving. Today, we talked to some of those caught up in the violence last night, and this is what they told us. Behind this window in Belfast are 2 Ugandan women, Sumaya and Stella. Last night, the 2 friends watched as cars burn and the mob get closer.
That is when they started burning the houses now. They put the next neighbors' houses on fire, and then the smoke was actually coming direct to our house.
Some rioters were going door to door, throwing petrol bombs, targeting migrants who look like them. Sumaya and Stella hid upstairs for 4 hours.
The people were very many, the rioters were very many, so it wouldn't make any sense for us to open the door. So we stayed inside, but the smoke was too much, kinda. I wasn't feeling actually fine, but my friend here stayed by my side, and the ambulance people kept her updated, like, try to do this for her, do this, do this.
Actually, she passed out. She passed out for like 30 minutes, and I got really so scared and traumatized because I was scared about the rioting and the people entering to our house. And here is my friend who was passed out, so I did not know what to do.
Stella, a Christian, and Sumaya, a Muslim, volunteer at a local church. In desperation, they called the police, their friends, their church. And by 10 p.m, it was Pastor Jack McKee who came to their house to try and save them. He had to negotiate with the rioters, just to give him 10 minutes so he can get both women out of harm's way. They agreed only after he told them they were carers.
We literally had to go under hoses that were putting another fire out. So when I got into that home, there were 2 women, and they were totally traumatized. One of them was lying on the floor in an absolute traumatized state. The ambulance people had been working with her. They couldn't take her to the hospital because of what was going on in the streets, and also because the hospital situation was just busy.
Were they targeted because of their background, because of their skin colour last night?
I would say they were targeted, yes, because people knew that living in that home there were people who were black, and that was enough. I don't believe that people purposely went out last night to do what they did, but when you call people onto the street to protest, some people are going to protest peacefully and some are not.
Today in Belfast, supermarkets, barbers and mosques closed early, fearing they could be targeted next. Many will reopen soon, but the fear may last.
Sarah Warsami there. Well, politicians from across the spectrum have condemned the violence in Belfast overnight, with the Prime Minister calling it shocking and unacceptable. The Reform leader, Nigel Farage, criticised what he termed bad actors, but went on to insist that the vast majority of those on the streets were neither far-right nor extremists. Our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara, is in Westminster now. Paul.
Yeah, for the second time in a row, Parliament at Prime Minister's questions has been wrangling with how to respond, not just to a horrific incident, but the violent response on the streets in reaction to that horrific incident. Some leaders were more dramatic than others. The Democratic Unionist Party leader, Gavin Robinson, asked if the Prime Minister would meet with him to discuss how he, quote, protects and closes the open, porous border between our country and the Irish Republic. Remember, that open border is the cornerstone of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, ensuring peace. Protecting it formed the basis of many difficult negotiations during the whole Brexit process, and the government is committed to it. There was also a fiery exchange between the Prime Minister and Reform's Richard Tice. Mr Tice condemned the violence on the streets of Belfast. He called it appalling. He also accused the Prime Minister of being in denial about the rising despair in the country over, quote, his failure to stop the boats and related criminality. The Prime Minister in turn accused Reform of seeking to whip up fear and division. This afternoon, though, the Reform leader, Nigel Farage, also spoke about the violence in Belfast at a press conference. His response, though, he condemned it like Richard Tice did. His response, though, was a little more nuanced.
There's no doubt about that. There were some very, very bad actors doing bad things, but the vast majority of those people who were out on the streets in Belfast last night were not far right, were not extremists, just really scared about what's going on in their communities and about the lack of government action. There's none.
This is an issue Reform have no intention of walking away from an argument on.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Northern Ireland Justice Minister, Naomi Long, who is also the leader of the Alliance Party. I began by asking her for her reaction to the violent events of last night.
Well, I think like everyone else, I was absolutely horrified. I recognise that what happened on Monday night was an appalling and brutal attack. I think everyone was repulsed by it, but also frightened and angry that this had happened. And that's understandable. Those are normal emotions. But what I can't accept is that other people, simply due to the colour of their skin, are now being targeted in their homes, are now being made victims.
Nigel Farage says the vast majority of people on the streets last night were not far right, they were not extremists, they were just frightened people who are concerned about their community and angry about the lack of political action. Do you accept that?
I think there's an element of truth in that, but I think that interventions from Nigel Farage and others who are on the far right of politics have been profoundly unhelpful, because what they do is they take people's pain and fear and they weaponise it to create division in our community. Northern Ireland has come through a lot of trouble over the years. There has been much division. We know how bad that can be. We don't want to go back there. So I would like those bad faith actors who have been on social media encouraging this kind of violence to stop winding this up.
Why do you think it is happening? Because if you agree with Nigel Farage when he says the vast majority of people on the streets were not far right, were not extremists, they were just frightened, does that include the people who were burning houses, who were burning cars, who in the end forced people who have been living there for 2 decades to have to leave their home in fear?
No, it absolutely does not. There were people who turned up last night who were equipped to riot. There were social media posts telling people in certain neighbourhoods to turn off their Ring doorbell, to turn off their CCTV cameras so that nothing would be captured. People were being abused who had a phone there. People who were there with the media were being threatened. This was a concerted effort to attack people in their homes. Those people were racist. And many of them, I have to say, are young people who have been radicalised online through mis and disinformation. And we need to get a grip of that.
And how do you delineate between communities who say they have valid concerns around immigration, around the speed of immigration, around the shortage of services, between that and horrific racist attacks? But that is also laid at the door of politicians, isn't it?
Well, first of all, the shortage of services, let me tackle that head on. If it was not for immigration in Northern Ireland, if it was not for people who have come here from outside, we wouldn't have services. The bus that was hijacked last night was driven by a foreign national. The people whose shops were burned are entrepreneurs providing services in those communities.
The DUP are quite clear that a part of the problem is this common travel area, that under that agreement, people can come up from the south, and as they put it, no one knows anything about them, and they want that to end. What's your view on that?
Well, first and foremost, they have undermined the agreements that we had previously, where we were able to repatriate people to France, for example, by dragging us out of the European Union. So on their head be it. Second thing is that, yes, there is a flow northwise across that border. We're aware of that. It has exploited the common travel area by organised criminals of all kinds, including immigration criminals. But I have to say that flow is not one way. Rather than finger point at our nearest neighbours, we need to work with them closer now than ever in order to ensure that these islands are secure and that all of our people are safe, whether they were born here or whether they came to live here through choice.
And just finally, if you would, how hopeful are you that there is an end to this last night?
Well, look, I remain hopeful. I am particularly grateful for the intervention of the family, and I hope that people will respect the dignity that they have shown and will resile from this constant intimidation. It is damaging our community and our reputation, and it is helping no one.
Naomi Long, thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, joining me now from Londonderry is Lillian Sinwar-Barr, the Mayor of Derry City and Strabane from 2024 to 2025 and still serving as an SDLP councillor on Derry City Council. And from Belfast is Ben Lowry, the editor of the Belfast newsletter. Thanks very much, both of you, for joining us. Lillian Sinwar-Barr, can you tell me what you felt as you watched those scenes unravel?
It was horrifying, and there was so much fear in our community, and the families that were threatened, people afraid to leave their homes. There were so many children who could not go to school today because of what happened yesterday. And I have to start by saying whatever happened 2 days ago was horrific and it was brutal. But what followed was also so much horrifying for our communities, and it is such a shame that there are so many people on the street protesting and rioting and destroying their own communities.
I mean, Ben Lowry, people are angry and upset, and really understandably so, but many people saying that actually what last night was about, it was organised, it was opportunistic and it was racist. What's your assessment?
Well, I think the violence last night was atrocious and terrifying and wicked. And I think most sensible people would say that. I think it is also fair to say, as you have been discussing, and as particularly unionist MPs have been saying, there are very real concerns about immigration that haven't been listened to. And I was interested to hear part of your, there's a lot of noise going on here, coincidentally, helicopter overhead, as often happened in the Troubles when there were soldiers overhead and there's an alarm going off. But I think, so I haven't heard everything, but I think you were talking with Naomi Long about whether or not some people were protesting peacefully. What I would say is the great bulk of people who are concerned about immigration are not protesting at all. They're sitting at home. They don't feel terribly strongly about it. They have worries about it. And then there were people protesting peacefully in places like Lisburn last night. And then there was also this terrible orchestrated violence by bad people. But with regard to the concerns about immigration, there's a lot of things going on there. For example, in the loyalist areas, and there's a determination to depict, I edit a unionist newspaper, there's a determination to depict unionists and loyalists as more racist than anyone else. Well, first of all, that's entirely wrong. But there is also demographic change.
Most of the chaos of last night was in loyalist areas, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and I'm not denying that. But there's been demographic change here, and Irish Republicans, people like Michelle O'Neill, are not slow to point that out to us, point out to unionists that their time is up and all the rest of it. And a lot of these loyalist areas, there's more spare housing and immigrants are moved into it, so they have a higher level of immigration. And what we are also seeing is in the Republic of Ireland, where immigration, there's a lot of large-scale immigration. The Irish government, like the UK government, doesn't know what to do. There have been very significant protests as well, and violent protests. And also in the Republic of Ireland, there have been incidents in which immigrants have been implicated in illegal behaviours or attacks or whatever. And I can think of instances where I read mainstream reports, and I'm part of the mainstream media, I'm not sneering at the mainstream media, which didn't even mention those triggers.
But there are many people last night involved in legal activity, aren't there?
Legitimate. Yeah. All I'm trying to explain is how genuine concerns and very real concerns that are dismissed, and they're dismissed often by politicians and commentators who live in affluent areas where there is no immigration. They are dismissed, and that adds to the explosive situation. That's what I'm saying.
Let me bring Lillian in on that. That there are valid concerns about the rate of immigration in certain areas, about the speed of that change, about pressure on services. What do you say to that?
Northern Ireland is the least diverse part of the United Kingdom right now. We have a very small number of people, 3.4%, 1.9 million people living here, and only 3.4% are people of color and minoritized communities. That is a fallacy, what Ben is trying to tell us. Let me just talk about last night, because what we were seeing is organized racist violence, and it is extremely dangerous. We're not going to shy away from speaking about that. It was fueled by far-right narratives online and on the ground. Some of the language that has been imported to Northern Ireland by people from outside Northern Ireland, this violence was orchestrated. And yes, the target was loyalist areas. And I want to bring something in, because when Bernie is speaking about this, he's also not being completely honest. Northern Ireland has to be honest about the long-standing concerns around elements linked to loyalist paramilitary intimidations on minoritized communities. This is not a new story. After summer 2024, last year, the year before, the United Nations Anti-Racism Committee expressed serious concerns over widespread reports on paramilitary groups and affiliated individuals perpetuating acts of racist violence and intimidation. That is organized, and we have seen it happening every single time last year in Ballymena and again yesterday in Belfast.
And so, Ben, just on that point, that there may be wider issues around immigration, and you're suggesting that most of those people are not out protesting, but this idea that this is in loyalist areas, it's orchestrated by loyalist groups, and it is fundamentally racist. What's your assessment of that?
So one of the things that I would say is that Northern Ireland, having had the Troubles and having had paramilitaries, has, let's say, more of the infrastructure for when people behave in a despicable way to do that. I was conceding that there were orchestrated gangs, but there's so many things that were just said there that are wrong. I mean, yeah, it's actually true that race relations in Northern Ireland are good, and they've mainly been good because we've had a very small immigrant population and people haven't felt threatened. But and by the way, anyone who's used the NHS here will know the Filipino nurses and all sorts of foreign workers who are essential to it and do great work, so like all over the UK. However, the pace of change, which is the same as in England, but is new here, and where people are being put to, and a perception that they are being put in loyalist areas, which I think they are. There's a conspiracy theory that it's deliberate. I'm not saying that that's true. I was saying earlier, I think that there's more housing. We've had the same issues with hotels being taken over, and a feeling that when hotels are closed, which the government is trying to do, that local populations aren't getting housing that is being given to immigrants. And these are real flashpoints.
Ben Lowry, Lillian Senwar Bar, I'm going to have to end it there. I'm really sorry. I know there's much more to talk about. Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you for that.